Good evening, everyone. My name is Aziz Douai, Dean of the Faculty of Graduate Studies and Research. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the Taste of Research Enduring Discoveries. Before we begin, I'd like to respectfully acknowledge that we are gathered this evening on Treaty 4 territory, the University of Regina with its 3 federated colleges, First Nations University of Canada, Campion College, and Luther College is situated on Treaty 4 lands with a presence in Treaty 6. These are the traditional homelands of the Nehiyawak, Anishinaabeg, Dakota, Lakota, and the Métis nations. We recognize that in the spirit of reconciliation and through our work, it is our responsibility to strengthen relationships with Indigenous communities and build a more inclusive future for everyone. I also want to acknowledge the recent passing of the Honorable Murray Sinclair, trailblazer, lawyer, justice, senator, chair of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and so much more to so many of us. His work and that of others has forever changed this country and forced us to face the hard truths of Canada's relationship with Indigenous peoples and to work together as we walk the road of reconciliation. I'd like to take a moment to thank members of our senior leadership team and university executive team for being with us tonight, as well as some special guests from our Chancellor's community. From our Chancellor's community, Marlene and George Smado, you're here. Larry Hesterman. Gladys Sylvester. Gordon Perfect. I also would like to welcome Monica, or extend my warm welcome to Monica Peters and Andrew Cameron from the university's Board of Governors. Dr. Jeff Keshen, the University of Regina's President and Vice Chancellor, is traveling on behalf of the university, but sends his regrets. As an academic and scholar himself, Dr. Keshen understands the value of research to those who undertake it and those who are the ultimate beneficiaries in our communities and around the world. He extends his best wishes for tonight and thanks you for joining us this evening. I will now invite Pam Klein, Chancellor of the University of Regina, to say a few words. Madam Chancellor.
Welcome everyone, and certainly welcome to our special guests and honorary attendees. And I would like to thank you, Dr. Douai. He actually has a leadership experience in journalism, in terrorism, in disruptive communication, in media and crime. I think it's very appropriate that he leads our discussion tonight, given our political environment. But we really do appreciate your opinion and your commentary. It's my pleasure to be here this evening as we highlight just a taste of some of the outstanding research being undertaken at our university. It's especially exciting to be here as the U of R celebrates the 50th anniversary. And tonight's event really showcases how we've developed, how we've cultivated generations of very impressive scholars. Research is at the heart of our university. And I'm looking forward to hearing from some of our researchers engaged in long-term research, which is so valuable, but often unsung. Through their work on long-term research projects, our researchers are delivering the crucial year-over-year data that makes it possible to better address our world's many challenges. When I think about research in general, the long-term research in particular I'm struck by as an expression of optimism is to spend many years fully immersed in the work of collecting data. For what is this type of work is not an investment, but it's in the future. Investing in the future is what universities do. We give young people the tools to forge ahead and create positive change for generations to come. And at times, in the midst of challenges, that can seem insurmountable. This evening, we see Dr. Hadjistravikoulis, life-altering therapy. We see body and lived experience through Dr. Holmes' research. And our water supply is equality. And we see this through Dr. Leavitt. And through Dr. Papandreou's intricate eye, we see the depths of the atom. Also tonight, you get a special treat. We see PhD graduate students who compete for the U of R 3MT competition. And we have Kawai Asi, we have Andy McClellan, and we have the award winner in Toronto, winner Michael. It is a huge treat. This evening is presented through our Chancellor's community. It's actually the second year of our anniversary, not the 50th, but we're very proud of where we're going to be going. It is a philanthropic network that is also invested in our future. It's comprised of leaders of business, academia, and the wider community who are dedicated to transforming the lives of talented students through education and empowering the next generation of leaders, thinkers, and our problem solvers. As Chancellor, it's my honor to be part of this, supporting the extraordinary research being done at the U of R through initiatives such as tonight's event, sponsors and supports through the Chancellor's Scholarship and Fellowships. So since launching the Chancellor's Community, which was last year, we nominated them in November, and we awarded them in spring, and they're launching in their first year at the U of R this year. They received a 4-year, $40,000 scholarship to complete their education through the U of R. And these young scholars, they are very special indeed. They have a 95 plus, and I say plus, average, and as well, they give back very deeply to community. There are also 2 PhD students who have also received $50,000. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank our Chancellor's community, certainly for their leadership, and certainly for their vision and sponsorship in helping to lay a very sound foundation for these future change makers as they pursue their educations here at the University of Regina, and prepare to make their marks on the world of academia, as well as the communities where they live, grow, and contribute. As you can learn more about how you can be part of this circle of supporters by visiting our website, or feel free to contact one of our development officers. They are very well versed. They really do know the Chancellor's community, and they live and breathe it all the time, so please feel free to call them. And I'd like to thank our researchers for the work that they continue to do in the lab. They do it in the field, and they do it in the classroom. And thank you for joining us this evening and supporting a very forward-thinking research initiative of our contributors and for all of you here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Chancellor Klein. If research is at the heart of what we do at the University of Regina, long-standing research is arguably the backbone, providing the data that forms the basis of your research projects, policy development, and strategies to help us move forward together across industries, community, healthcare, and our society at large. Tonight's presentations offer insights from some of the brightest minds working at U of R in areas from psychology to atomic physics, child welfare to theater, and water quality, and from water quality to dementia care. I am honored to be here this evening to help share a sampling of some of this research with you tonight. Each researcher will present an abridged version of the ongoing research that they are working on, delivered in a short and easy to understand manner. Just to be clear, they are not required to deliver a 3MT presentation. It's not here. I'll now invite our first presenter of the evening to the podium. Dr. Heather Hadjistravikoulis is a professor of psychology in the Faculty of Arts, where she leads the Wellbeing Innovation Lab. She founded and is the executive director of the university's online therapy unit, which has been providing and studying internet-delivered therapy in Saskatchewan since 2010. She also established and is the director of PSP-Net, a network focused on improving internet delivery therapy for public safety personnel across Canada. Heather's work has attracted more than $50 million in research funding. Again, more than $50 million in research funding, and led to more. And led to more than 200 published studies. She's a fellow of both the Canadian Psychological Association and the Canadian Association of Cognitive Behavioral Therapies, and has received multiple awards, including the Leadership Award from the International Society for Research on Internet Interventions. It takes time and many years of effort to amass the body of research that now helps Heather guide the units, teams, and students with whom she works. Please welcome Dr. Heather Hadjistavropoulos as she shares with us a taste of her life-changing research.
Good evening. I just want to start off by asking you a personal question. You don't have to answer it. But the question is, have you ever considered going to therapy or felt that somebody that you know should go to therapy, but then decided against it because you felt like you could manage things on your own, or it would be too inconvenient or expensive? The reality is that many people feel this way. I know I felt that way in the past. Mental health problems, especially when we consider the continuum from mild to severe problems, are extremely prevalent, but often undertreated. In fact, most people do not receive treatment. So for the past 15 years, although I've been working as a psychologist for 30 years, for the past 15 years, I've been very interested in the idea of unblocking and opening up a new form of treatment, namely internet-delivered therapy. The idea being that we want to have a different option that's available to complement other options like medication and face-to-face treatment. When I tell people that I study internet-delivered therapy, they assume that I'm talking about this, where there's a client and therapist interacting over Zoom or Teams. Well, that's wonderful. That's actually not what I'm studying. It's really quite different. The approach that I'm taking is called Internet-Delivered Cognitive Behavior Therapy, or ICBT. And in this form of treatment, what we're doing is taking what would normally happen in face-to-face treatment and putting it online in the form of a course. It's not easy to do, because face-to-face treatment is kind of messy. But we work and we work and we work to put that online. And then we provide support in a very different way as well. In this case, instead of the face-to-face interactions, we have clients and therapists who are mostly communicating through secure online messages on our platform. Just want to give you an example. This is one of the courses that we spent a lot of time researching with our colleagues from Australia. In this course, what we're focusing on is helping people who have anxiety and depression with developing different strategies for managing their concerns. And here what we do is we just present 5 simple sessions, and we spread those across about 8 weeks while the clients are communicating with their therapists. In each lesson, they're learning a new skill, and then they're working on that skill during the week. In lesson 1, for instance, they're learning about the symptoms of depression and anxiety and how our thoughts and our behaviors will interact and influence how we feel. In the second lesson, they're working on how we think has a big impact on those feelings and emotions. And the third lesson is about managing physical sensations that go along with emotions. And the fourth is on changing behavior, which is really common and needs to be addressed in anxiety and depression. So it could be, for instance, if you have anxiety, slowly approaching those things that you might be avoiding. Or if you have depression and you've become quite lethargic and withdrawn, it would be slowly increasing your pleasant activities or masterful activities. Again, what we do is we're presenting this in a way that's really trying to be engaging. I first heard about this approach about 15 years ago, and as a psychologist, it really resonated with me deeply. I think both personally and from what I was seeing in practice. So the number one reason that people do not go for therapy is because they want to self-manage. And I think that's a wonderful quality, that we want to be resilient, and so why not try and build an approach that's more comfortable for people and takes advantage of that quality. The second thing is convenience. Going to therapy week after week is inconvenient. We do everything else in our society to try and make life more convenient. Why would we not do that with therapy as well? And the third is that the very nature of mental health conditions can often make going to see that therapist extremely difficult. It's like asking somebody to go and run a marathon if they want to go and sit in and tell their problems to a therapist. And so this is an approach that makes it easier for people who might have low motivation and energy or fear and anxiety. It's not to say that face-to-face therapy doesn't have a place. I think it's wonderful. In fact, that's why I want to bring it to people. It's just that maybe we need to meet people where they're at. On a personal note, this is, oh, wait, I got ahead of myself. On a personal note, this is a picture from 50 years ago, which I thought was appropriate. What you see here is my dad, who was a family physician in rural Saskatchewan. And I learned from living in rural Saskatchewan just how few specialized services are available. So your family physician is in charge of not only physical concerns, but most mental health concerns. And so the idea of being able to bring this specialized service to rural communities was very appealing to me. Incidentally, it's also extremely good for people who do feel stigma about talking about mental health. What's been incredible is to see that this approach turns out to be as effective as face-to-face therapy. That's not to say that there's not room for improvement. There's tons of room for improvement in both face-to-face therapy and ICBT. But in fact, what you see is that these effects are equal. Whether you go to this or face-to-face therapy, you'll see a reduction in symptoms and improved quality of life. You may wonder, how can that be? How can that be? How can something delivered online be as effective as talking to somebody face-to-face? Well, what we try to do in ICBT is really replicate what's important in therapy, which includes providing support, giving insight, and third, helping with that facilitate change. And so these are the same types of things or common factors that are available in treatment that we make available through content and technology and therapist messages. The type of research that I do is called micro-learning health system research, which means that we're basically delivering the service, but at the same time we're doing research so that we're improving it over time. So every client who participates is invited to give feedback, and then that feedback continually improves the service in terms of content, technology, and therapeutic practices. What this means is that the service we deliver today doesn't actually look like the service we started with in 2010. It's constantly evolving, and the patient is at the center of that. The research has led to the development of 2 clinics. So one is the Online Therapy Unit of Saskatchewan. This is the lovely team that's working on this work right now. It's made up of clinicians, researchers, students, and developers. We have clinicians who work for the University of Regina, but also those who work in the Saskatchewan Health Authority. We have funding from various sources, including the Saskatchewan government. So what that means is that we're able to provide this service for free on an ongoing basis. We work with clients who have various mental health concerns, depression, anxiety, stress, PTSD, alcohol misuse, etc. And in total, we've worked with over 15,000 clients in terms of doing assessments and 13,000 clients providing treatment. An unexpected thing that's come out of this work in this area has been the development of PSPNet, which is this very specialized program that's designed to help our first responders and other public safety personnel receive the same type of treatment. Again, it's made up of a large team, and we have funding from various sources. This work is extremely important because our first responders, because of the nature of their work, experience higher rates of mental health difficulties than others in the general population, but also many barriers to care. We offer self-guided ICBT across the country, and then we've been able to offer therapist-guided ICBT in 6 provinces and have worked now with over 2,000 clients. So as I close today, I just want to share a few quotes from clients who have walked through this doorway to care and found it extremely beneficial. So one client said, "It gave me access to a CBT-based course that I would not have had otherwise. I now know what I need to do and practice to control my anxiety." And another client from PSPNet said, "As someone who has never gone to therapy or anything like that, this course has given me a lot of tools." These are quotes that we see every day. On that note, as I close, I just want to thank you for listening, and also thank you for anyone here that takes the opportunity to share this information and open this doorway of care to others. It's the biggest challenge with this area, is making sure that it's widely known to others. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. Our next researcher is Andy McLennan, who won the 2023 U of R 3MT competition and a finalist in that year's Western Regional competition. Andy is a clinical psychology PhD candidate at the University of Regina. Supported by a doctoral scholarship from the Alzheimer's Society of Canada, he researches pain assessment in older adults, specifically those with dementia. He previously held the Canadian Institute for Health Research Master's Award to study psychosocial impacts on cancer patients. He is involved with oncology-based research and has published several peer-reviewed articles on psychosocial outcomes for people living with cancer. Passionate about science communication and interdisciplinary collaboration, he actively contributes to student organizations and faculty committees, including training future 3MT competitors at the U of R. Please welcome Andy McLennan.
Oh, my God. Well, and that was a response to pain. And you knew that I was in pain because I told you. I said, "Ow, my back." And as I yelled out, you also saw what are known as pain behaviors. Because you saw me move, and you probably also noticed my facial expressions. So even if I hadn't yelled out, it still would have been clear that I was in pain. But what if, instead of me, the person you saw had severe dementia? How they react to pain can look much different. They may appear aggressive, and it may seem as if they're having a psychotic episode, and they can't communicate very well. And so it's not always clear if they're in pain. For example, take someone like Scott. Scott has severe dementia. He can't communicate with his words very well. And lately, Scott's been more aggressive with healthcare staff. He yells, he punches them sometimes, and so they treat Scott with antipsychotic medication, thinking that those behaviors are caused by a psychotic episode, by his dementia. But antipsychotics, well, those are powerful drugs, and Scott's weak body couldn't handle it. Scott dies because of those antipsychotics. Now, the reality was Scott needed pain medication. An Advil would have been just fine. And those behaviors were misperceived, and it cost him his life. And while this may seem like a dramatic example, it happens all the time. So the question is then, how do we assess pain for people with severe dementia who cannot tell us with their words that they're experiencing pain? The answer is as simple as a checklist. These are observational pain assessment tools, and healthcare staff can use them to assess pain behaviors just like Scott's, and the ones that you saw with me. Now, we have over 25 tools that we use, and they all assess different kinds of behaviors, like a person's facial expressions, or how their body responds when they're in pain, or how aggressive they are. And there's a lot of different ways that a person with dementia could respond to pain. And these checklists, they can assess that. But here's the problem. We didn't know which checklists were the most accurate at assessing pain for people with dementia. So in my research, I compared a bunch of them, 7 to be exact, on a group of older adults with severe dementia, who were in pain. And then I used some different kinds of stats to compare just how accurate they each were to one another. You know what I found? They're all the same. They're all actually very accurate. But my research also uncovered some other steps. On a deeper level, ways to make them better, even more accurate. Because right now, they're still not good enough. And if we can make them better, then we can help people like Scott, maybe members of our own family, receive the best pain-free care possible. We can go from mistreating with that antipsychotic to giving them the pain relief they deserve. And as our population continues to age at a rapid pace, we can continue to improve the lives and the well-being of people living with severe dementia. Thank you.
Our next researcher, Dr. Zizis. Andrio is a professor of physics and a principal investigator in the Faculty of Science, where he specializes in developing advanced nuclear physics instrumentation. For decades, Zizis has been using powerful tools such as particle accelerators and advanced detectors to delve into the mysteries of the universe. These sophisticated machines serve as super microscopes and atom smashers, allowing researchers to explore the fundamental building blocks of matter at the atomic level to advance our fundamental understanding of the world around us. With nearly a century of collective expertise, the University of Regina's Physics Department has been a leader in developing and deploying these technologies, making significant contributions to national and international accelerator facilities across 3 continents for more than 40 years. Beyond his groundbreaking research, Zizis is a driving force in the global physics community. He leads experimental groups at Jefferson Lab and the cutting-edge electron-ion collider, while also having chaired the GLUX Experiments Collaboration Board and the Canadian Association of Physicists Division of Nuclear Physics. With nearly 150 peer-reviewed publications and 230 non-refereed papers, he is not just pushing the boundaries of knowledge, he's practically rewriting the book. Zizis is also passionate about cultivating future scientists, having mentored more than 170 students, from high schoolers and undergraduate students to graduate students and postdocs. His lab is a launch pad for curious minds where the next generation of physicists gets hands-on experience exploring the mysteries of the universe. Please welcome Dr. Zizis Papandreou to the stage.
Welcome everybody and hello. Today we're going to take a very quick tour from the infinitely small beginnings of the universe to the depths of the atom. And of course this is a physics talk, so there's still time to run for the exits, but since I'm not seeing anybody move, I'm considering this to be a good crowd. So let's start with the bang, of course the Big Bang that almost everybody has heard. This was a flash that happened 14 billion years ago, and you can see it here. And what happened is immediately the universe started expanding and accelerating in the expansion. And for the first 380,000 years or so, we had a hot quantum soup, which was made out of protons, electrons, and photons, which are the particles of light, all bouncing around and hitting each other and not much happening. And of course, during that period, light could also not escape. But soon the universe cooled down, and that meant that the protons were able to capture the electrons now and form hydrogen, which is the first element of the periodic table. And once that happens, helium and other elements followed. And to make a long story short, then we have stars, planets, galaxies, supergalaxies, and so forth. So how do we know all this stuff, you might ask? Well, of course we have telescopes, everybody knows this, but we can also view things with X-rays, radio waves, and many other techniques. And the further away we look from the Earth, the further back in time we go with these methods. So of course, we've learned a lot, but to quote a Hollywood movie, it's a common misconception that scientists know everything, and of course we don't, because if we look at the universe, 95% of the universe is made from dark matter and dark energy, and we know very little about those two things, despite decades of effort. So, in physics, there's gut and toe. And what these things mean is that grand unified theory and the theory of everything, because physicists believe that the simplest theory to describe a phenomenon correctly is the preferred theory. So that's a very economic way of looking at things. And we believe at the beginning there might have been a single force, although we don't know. For the first very tiny blinks of an eye on the cosmic scale, the known laws of physics did not apply. We really don't know what was happening. But then after a while, as the universe started cooling from the Big Bang, then we started seeing the four known forces gradually split off in different stages, as you can see by this graph. So we had gravity come off, and then the strong nuclear force and the electroweak force, which eventually split into electromagnetic and weak force. So from the research side, we started from that end and gradually increased the power of our accelerators and started moving along the green arrow. And you can see we've managed to unify the electroweak force, so we combined some of them. We're moving in that direction, but we won't reach that with conventional tools here. We need the supernova and things like this to do the job for us, because that energy is not available here. So the four forces are shown here. Of course, gravity everybody's familiar with, the electromagnetic force that causes static electricity and so forth. And then there's two forces on the right here that are only inside the atomic nucleus. The weak nuclear force, which is responsible for radioactivity, the tick, tick, tick that you hear in Geiger counters. And the one that I'll focus on is the strong nuclear force. That's the subject of my research, because that actually provides the glue that holds the atomic nucleus together. And without that, we would have nothing but a loose collection of particles in the universe. So, how do we see? Everybody knows this. We see with our eyes. How does the eye work? Well, if we compare it simply to a camera, we have some object where light comes off of the object, goes through a lens, and then focuses at the back of the film of the camera. The eye does the same thing. We have a lens in our eye, and it focuses the image on the retina, and that's how we see clearly. Now, as many of us grow older, myself included, our eyes don't work the way they did when we were young, and we need eyeglasses or something to help us. And what you do then is you have something happening in your eye, which you can have nearsightedness or farsightedness, and as a result, you can see here that the image actually forms in front or behind the retina, which means it's blurry on the retina. So once you use a second lens that you can combine with the lens of your eye, then you can properly form the images back sharply again, and you can see it well. So, how do we want to continue with this? As well, vision is great, and we use light to see things, but light, or visible light, as we say in physics, is only a very, very narrow part of the electromagnetic spectrum. The electromagnetic spectrum, as you can see up here, consists of all manners of electromagnetic waves, radio waves, microwaves, infrared, UV, X-rays, etc. And these differ from each other simply in their frequency or in their wavelengths. So we want to study an object, we pick the correct tool or the correct scale for the object we want to study, and we go to the appropriate part of that spectrum there. So again, this is a physics talk, and I'm sure you feel cheated if you walk away and you don't see a single physics equation, so I provided one here. If you want to see the relationship, the product of the frequency or frequency times the wavelength for an electromagnetic wave gives you the speed of light, and that's true for all of these waves. It's a universal relationship. So if you want to boost our vision, we can do simple things. If you go to the pharmacy and you're trying to read the labels, you use your phone or some magnifying lens, that can only give you a magnification of ×2 or ×3. So the major discovery that really propelled medicine and science is when the microscope was developed a few hundred years ago. And then, of course, we were able to see things like cells and bacteria. You know that there's weird little things and they're doing stuff. And there you can get, with a good microscope, maybe a magnification of 1,000. Now, if you want to push the envelope a little bit further, light runs out of steam. However, the concept of a wave is still useful. So you use particles instead. And a major breakthrough happened in the 30s with the scanning electron microscope, which essentially is a practical use of an electron as a wave. You're using the wave properties of an electron. So it uses magnetic lenses that do a similar job in focusing the electrons as optical glass lenses, for example, do for focusing light. So then you can see other crazy things at a much smaller scale. You can see, for example, pollen grains here. You can see a nematode worm and its egg and a soybean. coronavirus that most people are familiar with, and some weird looking thing that'll appear in the next Alien movie. So here you have about a magnification of 1,000 when you do this. That's what we covered up top. There's one more device called an SDM, which can give you a magnification of 10, sorry, I said of a million. This gives you 10 million, so it just boosts it a little bit further. And you can do games like the IBM researchers did it, because you're manipulating now individual atoms. They actually use this device to spell the initials of their company. Okay, so scientists like to play. Now, if you really want to truly go to the depths of the atom, then of course what you've got to do is exploit this unique property that we see in physics that I mentioned earlier for the electrons, is the particle-wave duality. Particles sometimes behave as waves, and waves sometimes behave as particles. I mentioned photon, which is the particle of light, but light is a wave. So here, when we use this particle-wave duality, that's the magnification, 10 trillion or more. Okay? Why bother? Not because we can do it, but actually because if you really want to go and look inside the atom and the nucleus, that's what you need to do. That's the kind of magnification that you need to do. And you see here a little bit of a scale. The atom is 1/100th million of a meter, so it's pretty tiny. The nucleus is about 10,000 times smaller than that. It's composed of protons and neutrons. These particles are about 10 times smaller than the nucleus. And finally, protons and neutrons themselves are composite particles, and they're composed of quarks. Now, we've been able to push the research all the way up to seeing the quarks, but not further. So we don't actually know if there's something in the quarks. There could be something continuing this layered thing that we've been discovering over the last 100 years. So if numbers are something that you don't like, if a nucleus was the size of a raisin, the atom will be the size of a sports stadium. That's just to give you the scale. Okay? So that was a cartoon of everything that I showed you 2 slides ago. A more realistic representation of what the atom will look like will be here, where you see the nucleus inside, and then you see probably shells of electrons and all the possible locations of the electrons. But the electrons are not little balls. They're actually waves. And we actually don't know where they are, but we can tell you the probability of them appearing somewhere. Okay, so then we look inside the nucleus, and that's a scary place. Okay, that is very dynamic. It's frothing, it's bubbling. There's particles created, particles annihilate. It's constantly changing, and every second that you look at it, it looks different, even though it is the same atom, the same nucleus that you're looking at. So this is what we're trying to study, and for that, as you heard in the introduction, you need a different kind of microscope. You need a particle accelerator. This is big science. These experiments are usually composed with hundreds or even thousands of scientists together, because they need from tens of millions to billions of dollars to run, and they're run in centralized facilities in a few countries, which invite international teams of people to go and participate. And the one specifically I want to talk about today is Jefferson Lab, which is in Newport News, Virginia. It's a particle accelerator, and the way it works is it puts electrons inside this racetrack and accelerates them round and round and round until they reach nearly the speed of light, and then it extracts them in a building that's called Hall V, which houses the GLUX experiment. Here, our physics department has been a member of that since the onset in 1999. This is the long time scales of experiments that occur. So, what's inside that hall is this giant instrumentation that took about 10 years to build. You can tell the scale. There's a person standing over here, and the way the experiment works is you have a beam of photons, essentially very super high energy light coming in and striking protons, liquid hydrogen, which is inside the middle of the superconducting solenoid. This is a 200-ton monster, and inside there's many different detectors. Some of them specialize in detecting curving charged particles as they're moving in the magnetic field. Other particles are neutral and travel straight, so the combination of all these detector subsystems give you a picture of what's happening inside the detector. A key part of that detector inside the central region is what we're proud of, is the Regina barrel. So this is composed of special optical fibers embedded in lead. There's about 1 million of those fibers embedded in lead. And what it actually does is when particles pass through, you can see at the top, there can either be a single track which goes through the fibers and produces light in them, or sometimes the particles kind of explode and create a shower in there, and those pass through and deposit light in the fibers. That travels along the length of the barrel. It's connected by light funnels, and it's passed down to specialized photosensors that you see here in these little holes, and this whole thing mounts at the end of each one of these barrel segments. There's 4,000 of those mounted on the detector. So what this is essentially, it's called a silicon type of a sensor. It's very sensitive to light, and you can see the size of it compared to a penny here. And what our impact was in this area, a major breakthrough that we did in partnership with a private firm in photonics industry in Ireland, funded by the US government, by the way, to do this. And you see we took something that was a 1 millimeter type of detector and we made it the size of a postage stamp. It took about 4 years of research and development and $500,000 US to do that. And that now was such a major breakthrough. This device that you see here, that little square looking thing, is used in hospitals, it's used by the military, it's used in LiDAR applications everywhere. So it's off the shelf now. So because this works so well with the barrel at Jefferson Lab and these sensors, we got together with 2 other excellent teams in North America, Argonne National Lab in Chicago and NASA Goddard Space Center in Washington, D.C. And the 3 of us have expertise that we pulled together to develop the next generation of barrel, the super barrel, which is an imaging barrel calorimeter. And this one, on top of being able to do what the previous one was doing, it can also take pictures of the showers inside, as well as pictures of what the particles are doing at the same time. So this is going to be a gigantic 40-ton detector, $30 million, and it's going to be ready and deployed in the experiment in 2034. These take 10 years or more to launch these and build these. So here you can see an animation of what it will do. That super barrel will be in an epic experiment, or actually the epic experiment, electron-proton-ion collider. We're Corey, we're physicists, and here's what it actually will do. You will see that protons and electrons are directed with extreme precision. Remember how small these are, and they collide head-on to each other, and the electron actually shatters the proton. Each time a collision happens, the shrapnel looks different, and it accumulates in the detector. And our job then is to take all that shrapnel, where it hits the detector, energies and all those things, and rewind the movie. So we actually find out exactly what physics drove the collision at the point. And we do this tens of millions of times per second for years on end to calculate enough statistics. So, closer to home, of course, we care about sustainable agriculture. And so that what we did is we took all our expertise in fundamental nuclear physics and the sensor technologies and we applied it to plants. This is very important for Saskatchewan. So we designed and built one of the largest in the world positron emission tomography. It's a mouthful, but it's the PET scans that you know. It's exactly the same as the human PET scanners for diagnostic purposes in hospitals, but this one's customized for plants, and it's one of the largest in the world, and it's permanently stationed in Saskatoon at the Fedoric Center. And what did we do with that? Well, we partnered with our biologists here in the University of Regina, and we decided that it would be a good idea to take radioactive sugar and give it to lentil plants. Why? Because we could, but we also wanted to learn something from that. And we had 2 types of lentil plants. We had ones where they were starved of nitrogen, and you know plants love nitrogen. So we put the sugar in, the sugar never went into the roots, it just stayed at the surface of the plant and up in the stalks of the plant. And then we took a lentil plant that had been inoculated with beneficial bacteria that are able to get the nitrogen out of the soil and give it to the plant, and the plant is so happy, it says, "Thank you very much, here's some radioactive sugar." And this, ladies and gentlemen, is how I spy with my little life.
I will now introduce the next speaker, the 2022 3FT winner, Kweiko IEC. Kweiko is a PhD candidate at the Johnson Shiyama Graduate School of Policy and holds 2 master's degrees, one in public policy and the other one in business administration from the University of Regina. Over the past decade, Kweiko's research has covered a range of important topics, including job satisfaction, employee retention, and consumers' fraudulent behavior. His 2022 3MT presentation drew upon his master's thesis on decolonizing child welfare and won the U of R's 2022 3MT competition. He placed second at the regional 3MT competition and was among the top 3 winners at the national 3MT showcase. In 2023, Kweiko was awarded the National Students and Thought Leadership Award in Public Administration, and most recently, the 2024 Digital Research Alliance of Canada in EDIA Champions Award. In his 3-minute talk, Waco will discuss how Caucasus First Nation developed its child welfare policies and how the Mio Pemat Sewing Act has successfully kept Caucasus children out of government care by focusing on community-driven prevention strategies, including cultural teachings, parenting classes, and the guidance of Caucasus grandmothers to support the well-being of children and families. Please welcome Kwaiko Ayisi.
I'd like you to take a moment and imagine the life of Simone. Simone was a 9-year-old Indigenous girl who loved to draw and had dreams of becoming a doctor. In the year 2010, social services took Simone from her family and placed her in the child welfare system. Now, while social services claimed Simone was taken due to neglect, the actual reason was poverty and effects of residential schools in her family. After many years in the child welfare system, Simone lost her culture and her sense of belonging. Simone died at the age of 17. Cause of death? Suicide. 3 years ago, we learned a bit more about Canadian child welfare with 2 high-profile stories. 1, the discovery of unmarked graves from the era of residential schools. And 2, the signing of the first Child Welfare Act developed by a First Nation in Canada. This is seen in the picture with the signing by Chief Delorme of Caucasus First Nation, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, and Premier Scott Moe of Saskatchewan. The act is called Caucasus Mio-Pematisowen Act. Inspired by my decade-long work experience in child welfare, I'm excited to say this act was the focus of my research. My research answered the question, how has Caucasus First Nation retaken control over the well-being of its children? A staggering fact is that while Indigenous children make up 8% of children in Canada, they make up more than 50% of children in child welfare. Here in Saskatchewan, they make up almost 90% of children in child welfare. In discussing the act with Chief Delorme and others, I found that Caucasus basically supports families in its community to prevent the displacement of children. These supports include parental classes, supports from Caucasus grandmothers, and the inclusion of cultural teachings. Years after the implementation of the Mio-Pematisowen Act, can you guess how many Caucasus children were displaced? 0. Why does this research matter? Why does this research matter? Because the life of Simone and all other Simones out there matter. This research could reveal pathways for other First Nations in Canada to also develop their own child well-being laws. From British Columbia all the way to Nova Scotia, First Nations in Canada are rising and following the lead of Caucasus as they also work to retake control over their children. In the coming years, I plan to highlight the child well-being journeys of our incredible Indigenous peoples, so that as children in Canada chase after their dreams, all of us can contribute, Indigenous and non-Indigenous, natural-born Canadians and immigrants, students, faculty, and community members can all do a little bit more to make sure we do not sentence the next generation of Indigenous children to child welfare. Thank you.
Thank you, Kwaiko. And now I'll invite Dr. Shannon Holmes to the podium. Shannon is an associate professor of theater at the University of Regina, as well as a performer, theater maker, vocal coach, pedagogue, and researcher. She has performed, presented her research, and taught across Canada, the US, the UK, and Europe. Her solo show, The Kirk of Your Arm, was produced in Montreal, New York, the Royal Shakespeare Company studio stage, The Other Place, in Stratford-upon-Avon, UK, and most recently as part of Riser Regina 2024 season. In her presentation this evening, Shannon will discuss how she created The Kirk of Your Arm, a solo performance with cello, that grew out of her research combining different performance styles. The show blends singing and storytelling to explore themes of memory, family, and loss. Please welcome Dr. Shannon Holmes.
Good evening. I am an educator, researcher, and performer whose work revolves around voice. However, I think it's important that I also specify that I am a woman, I am a daughter, I am a partner, I am a mother, I am a caregiver, I am a nature lover, among a myriad of other things. And, well, you may be asking, what does that have to do with her research? Well, all of these things are relevant because I use autoethnography as a method. In short, autoethnography is a research method that centers the researcher as both the subject and object in their inquiry. The auto indicates that I am telling my own story. It's the self. And ethnography is the study of culture. The culture that I study is Western vocal performance culture, and the ways that I conduct this research is in and through my body. I use my own lived experience as evidence as I explore new techniques in voice training for performers. One of the guiding questions in my research is how may we build techniques that can support performers in negotiating the divide of the technical requirements of sound and efficient vocal production and the emotional requirements of a compelling performance. Overwhelmingly, my studies suggest that by centering the self in their process, performers can better integrate vocal technique and emotional connectivity to allow them greater vocal freedom and access to the totality of their vocal expression. The principal technique I use centers the body as both a medium and a conduit to transform the memory of a lived experience into vocal expression. The Crook of Your Arm is a solo music theater piece that I devised over 10 years ago at the very beginning of this research. In it, I weave the song Je ne t'aime pas, which was written in the 1930s by Kurt Weill. And I weave that through my own personal narrative that details my family's struggle with my mother's dementia diagnosis. Now, I did not set out to write this deeply personal story. The seeds of it were, in fact, revealed to me all those years ago at the beginning of this research when I was engaged in some very practical studio work. Now, I was guided by my research into mobilizing new techniques in interdisciplinary vocal training. And while in the studio, I was involved in some intense improvisational singing exercise. And these were meant to conjure up visceral, embodied responses so that I could provoke a library of sorts of images that I could use in the devising process. And so as I improvised through the song Je ne t'aime pas, which is translated from the French to the English means I don't love you, one image in particular stood out for me, and that was of a closing elevator door. And throughout that, I continued to improvise, and throughout, this image was pervasive. And it didn't take me long for it to dawn on me that this connected to a very specific experience that had happened to me just months before this time in the studio. My ailing mother was admitted to a long-term care facility. And I had flown from Montreal, where I was living, to Vancouver, where she was, to help her settle in. And when it was time for me to leave, she didn't understand why I was leaving her there. And the memory is of stepping into the elevator, seeing my mom in the hallway looking very small, very alone, very afraid, very confused. And the elevator doors closed between us. So this one image, instigated through these improvisational exercises, became the seeds of this show. In subsequent rehearsals, I mined the artifacts of the memory of my mother through my somatic archives, and truly I was transcribing these artifacts into the story that I told on stage. I did not imagine that I would still be performing this piece. I have performed it in several iterations in multiple cities in 3 different countries, and without fail, after every performance, someone approaches me and says, I too have experienced this in my life. And this is the power of telling our stories. So you can say that while my research objective is in developing new vocal techniques, the byproduct of this research is a creation of art that allows for the sharing of our collective humanity. I put these techniques into practice every day in the classroom, here with my students in the theater department, in our new Bachelor of Fine Arts in Devised Performance and Theater Creation. This gives our students the chance to tell their own stories, to share their humanity, and to foster connection. I'm grateful tonight to have Joel McDonald join me. Joel is a principal cellist of the Saskatoon Symphony Orchestra, and he is a graduate of the University of Regina. And tonight, we will share with you an excerpt from The Crook of Your Arm. I get from my mother my sunny disposition, my unwavering optimism, and my appreciation for old-timey expressions. Okie dokie! What in the Samuel is going on over here? Oh, for crying out loud! Honest to Pete, heavens to Betsy! My mom was the sweetest, the loveliest, the kindest woman you would ever meet. She never had a bad word to say about anyone. She was an amazing cook. She was a fabulous baker. She was a master gardener. She was a Sunday school teacher. And like most of the kids in my neighborhood, I would play outside until I heard my mother calling me in for supper. Calling me home. Shannon! Her voice was clear, melodic, operatic. Shannon! And I'm talking about my mom in the past tense, but my mom's not dead. Je so much from my mom, but it didn't happen all at once. It's a cruel disease where the person in front of you slips away from you one piece at a time. So they might look somewhat the same on the outside, but they're hardly recognizable at all. And I can't help but wondering, when was the last time she remembered how to bake a pie? When was the last time she remembered to water her garden? When was the last time she remembered my name? Or even looked at me like she knew me? How do you mourn the person right in front of you? And what about her? Is she mourning? Can you grieve the loss of yourself? I don't know, because we never talked about it. My mother and my father have been married for 65 years and they never talk about it. We all know, but we never talked about it because that was one of the most stringent rules in my household growing up. Do not talk about it, and hope to God it goes away. See you later, alligator. Take it easy. See you soon, you big baboon. Ta-ta for now. Je ne t'aime pas, car tu l'as voulu. Tu n'es qu'un ami. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shannon. I will now invite Dr. Peter Levitt to share a taste of his long-standing research. Peter is a fellow of the Royal Society of Canada, the UK, Royal Society of Biology, and the Association for the Sciences of Limnology and Oceanography. He launched a 30 years long Capel Ecological Research Program, founded the UofR's Institute of Environmental Change and Society, and for 21 years held the Tier 1 Canada Research Chair in Environmental Change and Society, and then he got old. His words, not mine. Peter's research uses the 5 M's: models, mud, math, manipulations, and monitoring to study how we impact the natural world and how the natural world impacts us, with a particular focus on how climate change and society affect our freshwater resources. Spending far too much time in the office has resulted in 230 publications, 344 talks, and being cited among the top 1% of scientists. Outside of academia, he has been a radio DJ and boasts a ridiculously large vinyl record collection. Just call it his personal approach to carbon capture and storage. Please welcome Dr. Peter.
It's also resulted in a really high body mass index, but no mass. It's not water. So I'm going to tell you stories about where we are and how we got here. Assuming I can figure out how to make the slides advance. There we go. There's us. Middle of, right there. This is the area that we study. It's composed of treaties 4, 6, and 10, a little bit of treaty 2, but it's basically the northern Great Plains, or the prairies as we call them here. And the reason I'm interested in this area is because it's impacted by a few things. There we go, those things. So pick your favorite disaster, whether it's climate change or excessive industrial extraction of water, over-fertilization, invasive species. These are all things that are happening to us, and they're happening at the same time. So how do we get ahead of these problems? Well, we study things that develop slowly for a long time to understand how they got there. So I'm going to basically have 3 little vignettes here. Where are we now? How did we get here? And what's the future look like? So here we are. We have lots of water on the prairies, not compared to some places, but we do pretty well. We have little things, we got big things, we got things that flow, we got things that stand in one spot. So how do we know about them? Well, we basically go out and measure things in lakes, and so we use surveys. And over the last 20 years, we've done surveys every 10 years to get an idea, take the pulse of where the water is at this time. And what we see is about half of the water is too salty to drink. So this is one of the fundamental things is we got water, but it isn't always all that useful or even that healthy for us. So I should say in all of these slides, there's going to be 3 things that you can get. You just pick which one you like. At the top is the take-home message, and there'll be a pretty picture, and then for the nerds in the audience, there'll be data. I'm not going to explain the data very much, it's there. It's mostly to remind me. The second thing we learned was that the water's kind of murky. So we lower this little disc into the water, and we measure the depth at which it disappears, and if it goes all the way down to the bottom, the lake's clear, and if it disappears right under the surface, then the lake's not so nice. And we sort of look at the number of lakes and how they're distributed, and things that are sort of salmon colored or red, those are really good water quality. So let's look at the map. Oh wait, none. The water quality, generally speaking, is characterized by a lot of stuff in the water. Whether it's little round green things, we call those algae. whether it's nutrient concentrations, or whether it's dissolved organic matter. It's kind of the tea color that, well, the color that we get in tea. It's just organic matter that's come from the landscape and transferred into the water. The third thing we learned is that the lakes are often quite toxic. They have a type of bacteria that grow and produce a toxin. It's very harmful to animals, particularly cattle and dogs. Dogs, because they're cute, they just sort of lick it up. And cattle, because they can really digest it well. Cats, not so much, they don't care. But what we see is that about half of the lakes have enough toxin that it exceeds World Health Organization drinking standards. And 4 of the sites, so about 4 or 5%, pose an acute human health risk. That is, touching the water is bad for your health. This is not a good state to begin with. Okay, so how did we get here? What's the role? The way we look at things, if you want to study things that develop slowly, you just have to look for a long period of time. So we've done this sort of 3 ways. The first way is by spending $30 million in 30 years. I didn't look like this when I started. And just measuring things in the lake. And this is where we've worked in the Capel as a model system. There's a number of lakes that drain from west to east here, from right to left. And these things are good model systems. We go out to the lakes and we measure all sorts of things: chemistry, physics, yes, and some physics, biology, and we do this every 2 weeks since 1994, mostly in the summer, because who wants to sample in winter? The idea here is that we're trying to get a sense of how things are changing through time. But because this is just a small area, we also have started to develop new programs using satellites and models to sort of spread things out, to get a better sense of the broader landscape. And then the other thing that we do here at the university, which is kind of cool, is we can go back in time. We basically take mud out of the bottom of the lake, and what lives in the lake dies in the lake. It sinks to the bottom and it forms a fossil record. So the deeper you go, the older it gets. So you can start really young and then get progressively older. Or you can reconstruct the history of the water quality in the lake. And when you do this, you learn 2 things. The first is that the advent of agriculture on the prairies degraded the water quality. Not a lot, but measurably. Whether you look at the amount of nutrient pollution on the top, how green the water is, the green bit in the middle, or whether there's toxic algae, the blue bit on the bottom. You see at the start of farming, that red thing in the middle, you see that after that, things are generally higher than before. The kind of things that you're getting are our pals here, Annie, Fanny, and Mike. Anabine, Aphanosomnon, go ahead, practice that one at home, and Microcystis. These are all toxic cyanobacteria. They're the sort of the floaty things that you see that looks like paint or grass clippings or little fur balls in the water. They're naturally in the system, but they're there at much higher levels than they should be. The next thing that we learned is that while things got a little bit worse after the advent of farming, post-1950, that's the Green Revolution, where we started to produce synthetic fertilizers, and population, particularly of cities, really increased. We've seen acceleration of the degradation. Systems get greener, they get more toxic, they have more nutrient pollution. Some of that nutrient pollution we've shown using the city of Regina as a model comes from urban sources. We dump our waste into Wascana Creek, which normally wouldn't flow at all most of the summer and all of the winter. And during those intervals, all it is wastewater coming out of the city. It goes down to Lumsden, hangs a right, goes down to Pasco Lake, and the wastewater enters the lake at that point. And basically, the more urban pollution you put in, the greener the lake gets. So we went back in time 200 years to before treaty, and we saw that the best water quality was prior to the development of the city. It's just gotten progressively worse since that time. Fortunately, the city did the right thing. It spent nearly $250 million. It upgraded the wastewater treatment plant to remove most of the offending substances. And we've seen almost immediately a recovery of the rivers. Now, we expect that because they flow very quickly. The situation's a little more complicated in the lakes. This is my only complicated graph. Basically what this is that little diagram on the right, is how scummy is the lake. If all the greenness is on the top, then that ratio of what's on the top to the average in the water column is about 1:1, so nothing changes. As the lake gets scummier and scummier, these numbers move up, and so when you look for long periods of time, you can see that downstream of the city, there looks like there's a problem. And it'd be really easy to say, oh, it's the city of Regina, they screwed it up. No, it's not. Most of the problems started 4 or 5 years before the city even started that. What it turns out is that there's an effect of climate change. We know these are our challenges going forward. We know it's going to be 3 to 5 degrees warmer in the prairies. And using this long-term data, we see that if you move the temperature up 3 to 5 degrees, you get twice as much algae, twice as much toxin. So what's going to happen in the future? Water quality will be worse. We also know that in order to produce more crop production, we are going to have more fertilizer added. We've done whole ecosystem experiments where we actually take the water and put in the fertilizer and say, well, what happens? Well, it gets a lot greener. Whether you look at the data, whether you look at the photos, it's really evident. The third one, and this is the big challenge because it's being driven by the government, is that we're planning on draining 75% of all remaining wetlands on the prairies. Now, this is against half of them have already been drained in the 1940s. What this means is that basically what wetlands do is they're a biological sponge. They hold all the water in place, they take the toxins out of the water, and they just lock it down there. If you join all these wetlands up, they drain from one into the other, into a small creek, into a big creek, into another creek, and water, guess what? Runs downhill. And at the bottom of the hill is your drinking water. So going forward, we need to be very careful whether this is a very good strategy or not. And there are other things we need to worry about, invasive species, excessive extraction for industrial uses. But I'm going to leave it there, and I'm actually going to put it back to you. I'm not going to say that there's no need for science, but we know where we started, we know where we are, we know how we got there, and we have a fairly good idea of what the future looks like. I challenge you that if you want a better future for your kids, now's the time to say we want better water quality in the prairies. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Peter. By the way, you're not old. So, I'd like to invite Michael Mensah, our next presenter, to the podium. Michael earned the Master of Science in Freshwater Management from Queen Mary University of London in the UK before pursuing a PhD in biology here with us at the University of Regina. He's also a recipient of the prestigious Commonwealth Shared Scholarship, and just this past week, Michael won the National 3&T competition in Toronto, a first for Michael and for the U of R. In his 3-minute talk, Michael will focus on his research into how to reduce salt levels in agricultural ponds to help keep pond water safe for Saskatchewan's livestock and increase the odds of a positive outcome for ranchers. Please welcome Michael to the stage.
Imagine being thirsty and feeling so dehydrated from a hike in the sun, only to be served a glass of salty ocean water, making you even thirstier and more dehydrated. This is the unfortunate situation that many cows in the prairies face every dry summer. In 2017, over 200 cows died in Canada because the ponds they drank from had salt contents that was at the time higher than the ocean. Aside from the $300,000 financial loss, farmers reported they had to deal with what felt like losing their family. The soils in the prairies are rich in salts, and many cases of high salts in ponds may arise in the future. This is why my research explores what causes elevated salt levels in ponds. To do this, I go out to the field to complete surveys which involve observing and recording features like vegetation cover, water depth, and land use practices around 40 selected ponds. I also collect water and soil samples to assess their unique properties in the lab with some fancy techniques. The goal is to gather and assess information from field surveys and lab analysis to know what causes ponds to either stay fresh or become salty. Initial results revealed two important processes keeping pond water fresh. One, vegetation slows the movement of salts from surrounding soils into pond water. And two, deeper water dilutes salts transported into ponds. These findings highlight the potential roles of plants and pond depth in maintaining fresh ponds for extended periods. For ponds that are already salty, my study is testing the effectiveness of two mitigation options in reducing their salt content. The first uses floating islands. These are platforms with plants that take up salts and store them in their roots, stems, and leaves. In the second, I test how well dredging, which digs up salty sediment from the bottom of ponds, keeps water fresh and safe for consumption. In all, knowledge from this study is valuable for keeping pond water fresh and sad cows happy to continue serving us with the freshest beef and the most refreshing milk drinks. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Michael. And you can see why Michael has made it to the North American 3MT competition coming up soon in St. Louis on December 7th. Please stay tuned to the university's website for more information about that competition. I will now invite Dr. Chris Yost, Vice President of Research, to the podium to provide some closing remarks.
Thanks, Aziz, and thank you everyone again for coming out for a terrific evening of research. I hope you see now the reason I have the best job in the world. This is what I get to see every day. This is what I get to do to support all of these incredible researchers. That's my job. My job is simply to help nurture and find ways that we can continue to expand and push the boundaries of our knowledge. I don't know about you, but I had several goosebumps throughout this entire evening. I think to Heather and I think about the psychology. What causes these goosebumps? And it's the excitement, right? It's the excitement, or it's sometimes the worrisome, or the feelings that are invoked in the research that we see, all the different types. And what I hope you also got tonight is that research isn't just about the data or the science. It's about the people who do the research. These are all personalities. Some pretty tremendous personalities when you think of the 3MT presenters, right? The young researchers. And I just again marvel at what can be done when we give people time and space and resources to think deeply about complex problems, and to think about solutions that will benefit the public good. I think where else can you find this type of environment? An environment that is dedicated to sustained long-term research support, to not just be fickle with this or that problem of the day, but to think deeply about where is society going? How can we help advance society? How can we help predict what the future problems are going to be and solve those? And while we're doing that, how can we translate that expertise into helping to tackle today's problems? And so again, I ask you, where else can you find that? A university is the place for this. This is, in my mind, the best place to work for those reasons. And so I will just conclude by saying again, thank you everyone for coming. We do this every year. I hope to see you back here again. And I will leave with one thing. This university is a very young university. It's only 50 years old. What have we accomplished already in those 50 years? The things you've seen tonight, how profound. They have profound impacts at the atom level, right? And international collaborations, to mental health supports, to protecting our water. And that's only in 50 years. What are we going to do in the next 50 years? What are the big things you think we should tackle? One of the important things that universities do is they need to be relevant to the communities they serve. So I ask you all, as community members, think about what are the big challenges you want your university to tackle in the next 50 years. I think there's pens and papers around that you can fill out. Give us your ideas. I will read all of them, I guarantee you. Also, there's an email, and that's why I have to now look at my notes. 50th, and look at that, I've already lost it. Well, there it is. You can email your ideas to 50th@uregina.ca. So that's 50 and then a th @uregina.ca. Or be impacted by what you learned tonight, inspired, have those goosebumps, and write down something that you think is the next challenge. And I said, we will read them all, absolutely. So thank you again for coming. Drive home safely, and we'll see you all again this time next year.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you for joining us this evening. I have a few housekeeping notes before we wrap up this wonderful taste of research. This has been an incredible night of sharing a small sampling of ideas by U of R scholars working in such a fascinating array of fields, and we thank each one of our outstanding researchers for presenting a taste of their inspiring work that continues to benefit our communities and will do so for years to come. Just before we call it an evening or a night, I'll draw the lucky winner of our Rebellion Brewing and U of R 50th anniversary gift basket valued at more than, let me just read the number here, $200, and the winner's name is, all right, George Smado. George! You can pick up your prize at the registration desk in the lobby. Again, thank you all again for joining us this evening, and if you're eager to learn more about the incredible research being done at U of R, be sure to subscribe to Discourse Magazine, the U of R's free online research magazine at discoursmagazine.ca, and you can also learn more about the Chancellor's community and how it's helping foster new generations of brilliant scholars and presenting events like the one we have enjoyed this evening. Head over to our website at uregina.com/chancellor. Have a great evening, everyone. Thank you so much.